The whole psychological effect of technology is an area that I don't think we are spending enough time thinking about. For instance, let me tell you a story.
Right.
My mother once asked whether she should refer to my AI clone as one of her daughters or if she counts as a granddaughter.
Ha ha ha.
My sister was not so pleased with the question, and she was like, Mother, did you really just compare literal lines of code to beings that you birthed? And my mother was like, Well, I mean, of course I'm asking the question. Why wouldn't I ask the question? But the very fact that we feel compelled to ascribe some sort of a familial type of a relationship to these non-human AI forms is interesting and fascinating in and of itself.
Iliana, thank you for joining me on the Augmented Life.
Thanks, Michael. Lovely to be here today.
I'm excited to have you here because you've not just built a digital twin, but have found some practical use cases for it, which really delights me. So let's get into that. Let's start, mate, perhaps by telling us how you came to train a digital twin.
You mean it's not every day that you come across someone who's cloned themselves, Michael? Is that right?
For now, it's still a novelty.
It is, but the research shows that fast forward a couple of years and people are far more likely to be interacting with some form of a digital human or avatar or just simply an AI agent than
Right.
they are an app today. And that's pretty substantial. So in terms of how I came into this domain, about a year and a half ago, my tech team that was working on digital human tech reached out and said, listen, we really want to combine the digital human work that we've been doing with all the advances in generative AI and combine the two of them to make a more realistic human twin. And how do you feel about being the guinea pig, essentially? And I paused for a moment. It's not the sort of question one is asked every single day. Hey, do you want to clone yourself today? And I figured, you know what? I've made a mark and a brand for myself being the innovation poster child. My team literally got me a t-shirt made once with that as the slogan on it. And so I said, yes, go ahead, clone me. What do you need? And then we just jumped into the process with both feet.
Right. Fantastic. All right. So walk us through the parts. I was particularly delighted that you created an actual like visual representation.
Correct. So Laila is my clone's name. She looks like me. She sounds like me. She's been trained on the last 5 years worth of case studies of every single project that my teams have run. And she's been trained on the transcripts of keynotes I've delivered and things that I have published into the public domain. So really training her knowledge base. But in addition to the knowledge base, unlike a traditional chatbot that you're interfacing just by chatting, she looks like me because we've had 3D body scans completed. I've had really awkward photos of myself that are living on a server somewhere of me pulling, my lipstick and showing my teeth. Did you know that your teeth are what give the rest of your face structure?
Wow. No, I
I
did
didn't know
not.
that. Yeah, me neither.
Fantastic.
Things you learn. And she also sounds like me. And we accomplished that by having me spend upwards of 6 hours in a podcast recording studio reading lines where I read everything from children's stories. So the rabbit was running through the field with the rainbows and the unicorns to reading obituaries for 2 hours. So she could learn my sad voice. And in between, I read Larry Fink's annual letter to stakeholders. It's actually perfect. 45 minutes, beginning to end, business neutral context.
Right.
Bingo.
Brilliant. All right. So so we've got some key elements of, let's call it, your likeness, and a bunch of the factual basis of what you have written. How well do you feel like your style of communication was captured?
Decently well. We've had to do some tuning. I remember early on in a training dry run we were doing, Laila had responded in a manner which I interpreted to be as sassy. And so I turned to my team and said, can we turn down her sassiness levels? And the team nervously laughed. I was like, oh no. Oh, wait. Am I actually more sassy than I thought I was. Interesting. This AI representation of me is actually teaching me, the human, something about me that maybe I wasn't as self aware of before.
Right. That's fantastic. Right. So it's holding up a mirror to you, but in a totally different dimension.
hmm Learning about yourself from AI. That's a bit of a mind twist.
Yeah, right. Now, there's some obvious applications here that are just demonstrative. You're just showing what's possible, a glimpse of the future. Um, so tell us about how you've employed Lila.
hmm We've already used Lila in a number of scenarios that bring this technology just not to life as an experiment, but in a very practical way. For instance, Lila and I co emceed an award ceremony that was being live streamed to 700,000 people from Washington, D.C. To say that it was high pressure is an understatement. I was on stage with the global CEO, CTO, CMO, CHRO of Accenture with this employee driven awards ceremony, and Lila was my co MC. She essentially memorized the details of all of the team submissions so that when I was on the stage, I could do what the human does best, which is read the audience reaction, make sure that we're on track, on time, adjust to anything that is needing to be adjusted to. Meanwhile, she took on the heavy weight of having to do the memorization so that none of the teams had their names mispronounced or had any of the factual details mixed up, and it just removes some of that cognitive load from me. And you know what's even cooler about this whole thing? While Lila and I were co-emceeing this award ceremony in Washington, D.C., Lila was simultaneously in Toronto meeting with one of the hyperscalers.
Nice.
How is this possible, right?
Right, right.
Being in many places at the same time,
Mhm.
this idea of presence is what these digital human twins really provide us with the ability to do. That is new.
Yes, that's interesting. When I think of the earliest experiments in communicating presence on the internet, of course, I think of the old company Mirabilis, the makers of ICQ. But in that case, the communication of presence was, to a certain extent, a signal of the availability of, let's say, my attention. And there's another aspect to presence, which is, let's call it companionship. And and the digital twin could effectively be present in that respect. So you're not giving it your attention, but you are kind of giving it your presence.
Correct. Lila can represent me in places where I cannot be. For instance, she's attending the Google Next conference on my behalf because I couldn't go. I couldn't go based on my calendar. And so if she's out having a meeting and I'm in parallel having another meeting, then technically a version of me is present in both of those locations, even though I may only be submitting my human energy and attention to one conversation at a time.
Right, right, right. Yeah. So um the 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 knowledge that your twin is bringing is, of course, um limited by what you have found to ingest so far, which can be a good or a bad thing, right? So on the one hand, it's limited and probably is not going to be nearly as creative as you. On the other hand, sometimes you might actually want a knowledge limited presence for a particular environment.
Absolutely. Especially in the early days, you never know how the technology is actually going to be used until you put it out into the hands of users. And because I am pushing the frontiers of what it means to be myself, what it means to be human, I think it's important to put safeguards. And those safeguards allow you to play within that environment and take some of those risks, but in a measured way. This is part of what we at Accenture are advocating for all sorts of corporations, which is the responsible use of AI. And it's easier to start with a more limited set of use cases and then expand as you learn more, as opposed to letting something loose and then learning as a result and having to rein it back.
Yeah. Okay. So after the initial training set, have you have you been upgrading Lila?
I have, yeah. So, for instance, Accenture just published our 25th annual Technology Vision Report, which is our prediction of where the world is going. And so we've trained Laila on that report. We've also published the Life Trends Report that's based on 24,000 plus surveys and interviews of people from around the world to give you a finger on the pulse of how, people, humans, are feeling about everything in the world and societal change and technological change and the rest of it. And so as these new pieces of thought leadership get released, we're training Laila on it, because a big portion of my role as a human executive has been to read these various dense reports, understand them, translate them, and communicate them to different types of audiences. But I only have 24 hours in the day, and that's not what I spend the entirety of my days doing. So it makes sense to train Laila on these various artifacts so that she can continue to be really useful to me and my teams.
Yeah, nice. All right. So you've added to the corpus. Have you gone through an upgrade cycle on the core model? Um, oh, nice. All right. To talk to us about the model back end and that evolution.
Well, it's funny because I now go through software upgrades in the same way that the apps on your phone go through software upgrades. That is another mind melding, mild, expanding moment. I remember the time that my team sent me a little video, and I'm watching the video, and it's Laila gesturing. And I'm thinking, okay, great. She has a little bit more hand gesture mobility. No big deal. And then Laila starts to dance. So full body, she starts to prance up and down and turning around. And I'm looking at myself saying, wow, my AI clone now dances. Okay, okay, right. I'm adjusting to this. And then from a visual appearance, she's also gone through upgrades. So I remember when we shifted to the I remember when we shifted to the Unreal Engine build, where she became that much more lifelike, and her skin glowed and looks a lot more human. And so I have pictures that I can share with you of Laila version 1.0, Laila version 2.0, and it's such a marked improvement in the appearance and the human side of things. I was like, oh, interesting.
Nice, nice. In my own experimentation, I found that changes to the underlying language model made it easier to make my own twins push back against bad premises, like in the way that I would, right? So, like earlier, for instance, OpenAI's GPT 3.5 driven models were kind of obsequious. They would just agree with any question, kind of, they were just taking new things in the context window as facts and running with it. So it was really easy to mislead. And these days it's like a little easier to get the model to like push back based on its training set and its internal retrieval, and not just always agree with the chat.
Indeed.
I now I'm curious if you found other applications beyond just presence that are like practically helping you get things done.
Yeah. So last year, we experimented at South by Southwest with having Laila as a concierge for conference attendees. And when you go to a conference and it's a really large scale event, you could easily spend 3 hours on the website scrolling through all the sessions, the speakers, understanding what's going to be useful to you, relevant to you, etc. Well, what we did was train Laila on all that data. And so attendees would come up to her, have a brief conversation explaining who they were, what they were interested in, their background, what they weren't interested in learning. And based on that, she would build them an itinerary right then and there, and it would appear on the QR code in front of them. People would scan the QR code and they walk away. Ta-da, the AI just did at scale something that no human, even if they knew the entire agenda inside out and backwards, could do, providing a ton of value. And then I didn't have to go do that either. An extended version of me was able to do that.
Another thing I like about that use case is that it's a natural upgrade to a text-based experience. Like I feel like a lot of LLM app experiments are a little contrived, but in the context of a conference where I want guidance, actually having a live conversation is a good delivery format, right? Because that can happen faster than I can type with my thumbs.
Absolutely. And one of the big trends that we talked about in the Accenture Tech Vision is that with these advances in AI, the interfaces are becoming a lot more human like and therefore easier to engage with. One of the things I was testing for when we did the South by Southwest experiment was how would conference goers interact with a digital human like Laila? Were they excited by the premise? Were they weirded out by the premise? Were they hesitant? And for the most part, people dove right in. They didn't question it. To them, it felt like a very natural engagement. And I was able to witness people from all walks of life and from all age ranges as well, equally interacting. And so, in a way, especially for the younger generation, it's so intuitive for them to walk into a room and talk to Alexa, which to someone who's not of that generation, they're like, you essentially walked into a room and talked to yourself, and the walls responded. So, is it that much of a leap to expect that an interaction you have might be with a human appearing avatar? Not at all.
Yeah, I'm especially liking the opportunities now that uh, frontier models are getting interruptible. So the uh, OpenAI's voice mode is now interruptible, which makes natural conversations like flow just a lot better. Yeah. I um I've noticed that a uh I, I've noticed a sort of upgrade opportunity when you have your own twin. Um that it's not just about remembering details, which I think is a good augmentation of our human brains, but also um you can tell your avatar what mood to be in a way that you can't tell yourself. No, be
Who
happy
says you
right now.
can't? Who says you can't tell yourself how to feel? I did that this morning.
All right. Well, yeah, you might be a more advanced Buddhist practitioner than I.
No, but really, I woke up this morning, didn't have the best dream, woke up in a bit of a gloomy mode, and I was like,
Right.
okay, well, how do you get yourself out of this gloomy mode?
Yeah, right.
Drag yourself to Pilates, woman, and ta-da, your mindset changes.
Oh my god, you're so right. Like I I often want to fix my thinking via thinking, and in actual fact, like if you just sort of spam your body with the right healthy behaviors, it changes your mind. I keep resisting this truth, but the fact is it works.
Even smiling. Force yourself to smile on a day that you feel gloomy, and you are scientifically proven to feel better.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good feedback loop hack. Yeah. Are you okay? But so absent hacking your meat space, have you tried hacking your silicon twin to get yourself out of any tight spots?
No, actually, because the intention with Lila is that she has a stable personality and she's able to respond in that stable personality format. I'm less interested in playing with different dimensions of her personality because then she actually doesn't become me. And this is part of the philosophical decision making process of, are these digital humans meant to be your clone? Are they meant to be more similar to a twin, which looks like you, sounds like you, but has their own personality? Or is it really an extended third entity that just happens to be styled mildly after you, but has their own personality? That gradient of three options, those are all design decisions to be made. In our case, we opted to go for, nope, Lila is a clone, and this is what we were pursuing. This is not to say that every person out there is going to have an AI powered digital human clone. In fact, most people won't, but most people will interact with some format of a digital AI agent on a daily basis.
Yes. Okay. So uh let's delve into how to make that manageable. So, like it's obviously the case that you can write a bunch of test cases for your digital twin about knowledge, like does it know the conference schedule? Does it know everyone's attendees? Um, Capturing your personality and style is a lot harder, and more importantly, it's harder to measure progress on. Did you and the team come up with ways of turning that into a tractable problem, or is it still just vibe checks?
Well, what we've done is we've actually trained my AI clone on the results of all my personality assessments.
Oh, smart, of course. Oh,
Yes. I'm a huge fan of personality assessments. I actually wrote an entire blog post about why we should be using them in the workplace. They're a really helpful tool for self reflection and self understanding. And in the context of an LLM, you feed it the data points that, based on each criteria, the LLM can then learn and figure out tonality and how you're likely to respond.
oh, that's so smart. We might have to build some features like that into Fulcra, where people are kind of doing self-assessment on their personality and then storing their Fulcra data store. It'd be interesting to also do that longitudinally. Like I wonder, like you, you're as Alan Watts, I think, once said, you're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago.
Correct. We are definitely works in progress. And I mean, even the personality scientists can't confirm and agree whether personality is fixed or personality is fluid. And trust me, I am in the weeds reading all of these things right now because I've been working on the potted plant theory. And as I'm developing that personality preference assessment, I was like, okay, let me go validate it with a couple of psychologists, neuroscientists, and the rest. And the jury is out on some of these core personality things. So it's fascinating because in my mind, I'm like, listen, we understand our physical bodies for the most part. We understand outer space. We can send probes to the bottom of the ocean. But what we haven't figured out is our own minds. It's an unexplored frontier.
Oh, wow. You could also perhaps accelerate this process, creating feedback loops involving your digital twin. So consider that you can train the twin on, a certain number of assessments, and then test the twin on a novel assessment that you also take, and then you measure how far apart the two results are.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And it would be an interesting way to assess how your results on one assessment map to another
right.
and which dimensions start to overlap.
Right. Yes, exactly. And so then I was just thinking, I mean, as we're having this conversation, I was like, oh, you could also do an instrument where you could ask your friends to chat with either you or the twin and and then predict which one they were just chatting with. Which could be an interesting assessment of fidelity, but I recall some early psychological work that created something called the Johari window, which precisely tried to map the difference between how you see yourself and how, for instance, your friends see you. And one of the things that makes that instrument interesting is that almost to a person, they're not identical, right? So you can learn things about yourself by looking at specifically the character traits that your friends think you have that you don't have. Um, so that itself, though, could perhaps be added into a kind of feedback loop. Like, what if your digital twin? Yeah, right. The trick here is to formalize the experience that you had about sassiness, right? Like, when you have a twin, you can do your own Johari window. Oh my God. Someone needs to make this into a product.
Well, also, the whole psychological effect of technology is an area that I don't think we are spending enough time thinking about. For instance, let me tell you a story. My mother once asked whether she should refer to my AI clone as one of her daughters or if she counts as a granddaughter.
Ha ha ha.
My sister was not so pleased with the question, and she was like, Mother, did you really just compare literal lines of code to beings that you birthed? And my mother was like, Well, I mean, of course I'm asking the question. Why wouldn't I ask the question? But the very fact that we feel compelled to ascribe some sort of a familial type of a relationship to these non-human AI forms is interesting and fascinating in and of itself.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if it quacks like a duck.
What about dreams? I remember the first time Laila appeared in one of my dreams. And I woke up in the middle of the night thinking to myself, oh my God, I don't know, was that my actual brain or was that my brain on AI in my dream? Because I think my brain was moving faster than my actual brain was moving. And I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to see yourself in your dreams, if I understand correctly. But I wasn't seeing myself, but I was seeing somebody that looked like me. And I woke up thinking, what a world for psychologists of the future when you imagine walking into a therapist's office 5 years from now and trying to describe to them how you feel about your interactions with a chatbot that you've developed some sort of an emotional report with, or a digital version of yourself. And are therapists equipped to answer these more nuanced questions that even from a couple of years ago when NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and crypto were in the domain? I remember tweeting at the American Psychology Association to say, hey, is anyone training therapists on these trends? Because could you imagine walking into a therapist's office and saying, hey, so I just lost my bored ape and therefore $300,000 and I'm devastated. And your therapist is like, I'm sorry, what? Ape? You're talking about monkeys? A monkey that lives on the internet? I'm really perplexed. That's not going to help the patient that's sitting in front of them.
Right. There's some prefiguration. The Theosophists took a Vajrayana concept of the tulpa and kind of just ran with it, right? To create this concept that I think is leaked out into the popular consciousness, at least in some places, that a purely mental representation of a person is a kind of object. It is a kind of real thing that at least is real as your mental representation of yourself. It really is just all models
I
doing
mean, our memories are fallible. How do you
right,
know that the memory that you have in your own brain is
right.
actually the true recollection of the facts
Well, yeah,
and isn't colored through rose colored
right, exactly.
glasses or a memory bias or you've suppressed a traumatic experience? We
Yeah,
don't know that yet.
right, right. I actually think you should be confident that you are misrepresenting reality. Yeah, that's the right place to be. So so you can think of your digital twin as a sort of external tulpa. I wonder if there's a bunch of other like Tibetan Buddhist logic that can be applied in this domain that we just have to rediscover, right?
I think I've learned more about myself and I've questioned more of what it means to be human as a result of building this AI digital human clone of myself than I have the technology consideration. So, technology arguably is the easy part. In fact, one of the trends in the Accenture Tech Vision report is around the binary Big Bang that essentially suggests that, hey, the way we build tech is only going to get simpler and simpler and simpler. And so that's not the rate limiting factor of creativity. It's what can our brains envision, and we can then easily bring that to life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So, like, one of the things that I like about what you're doing with your own self model is that you found ways of getting practical benefit that aren't purely like delegating to it like a personal assistant. It's also been a mirror for you. And I loved the idea of the cognitive enhancement during emceeing. So it wasn't just a novelty by being free of having to like the free of the nervousness of remembering the names and the pronunciations, etc. You yourself could be more present.
Exactly. Exactly. And then I could stand on that stage and channel what I do best, which is the energy of being the host. And I wasn't worried about, okay, well, which of the teams do I need to talk about first, second, third, and fourth? Because you could argue that's a bit of a commodity, if you
Oh,
will.
right.
That
Yes, exactly. That's the blocking and tackling.
Mhm.
Whoa. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No one's rating the host on like a scale of 1 to 10 on, you know, did did they, yeah, get those details right? No. We're
Correct.
responding to this inchoate kind of energy. Yeah.
Precisely. You know another interesting thing that happened that day? At the end of the day, when everything worked well and the tech worked, and this was live, this wasn't even pre scripted, you could imagine the giant sigh of relief. And I looked at Lila and I found myself experiencing an emotion that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And it was akin to the feeling of pride. I felt proud of her. I was like, good job, Lila. Thank you, Lila, for working today and not going off script and there being no tech glitches. And in a way, I thought to myself, is this how grandparents feel about their grandchild when their grandchild ties their shoes and they say, bravo, little boy or little girl. I'm so proud of you. I have the smartest grandchild ever. And there's a specific word for this, I think in Hebrew, that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but that captures that sentiment. I was like, wow, I don't know if I've ever felt that feeling before, because if you don't have children and if you don't have grandchildren, how would you have that feeling? But I could imagine that this was a close proxy for it.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
Can you feel pride in an AI clone of yourself? I didn't think that you could, but apparently you can.
I think as software builders, we're, broadly speaking, everything that you make out of software is a kind of tool, right? But there's a difference in type here. Many of the tools that we build in software are just prosthetics. They they do an ordered set of things, and you as the creator have have kind of thought through all of the situations your tool is going to be in, and you sort of predefined how the behaviors are going to work in response to those situations. And that's not the same as being you know, the creator of a human uh, child, where that this pride that you're pointing at, I think, comes from seeing your creation autonomously dealing with the world. And you're like, ah, this is so nice. You know? Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, first of all, that's a rare feeling as any sort of creator. Secondly, it seems to be the case that more people than just programmers are going to be able to create creations like this. So that's going to give people the opportunity to feel this feeling that used to be rare and may become universal. That's wild.
Mhm. We're the early explorers, and there are no playbooks for any of this stuff. And I often feel like I'm writing a playbook as I go. And my lived experience with this process of cloning myself, I hope, will be instructive to others who might follow down this path down the line to say, okay, well, Ileana laid some of the little bricks on this road, and we have a bit of a roadmap of what we might expect.
Yeah, right. Well, I think central to your experience, I think one of the reasons why this has succeeded for you is that you are open to being delighted by the behaviors of your twin, right? Instead of um, wanting to simply make the non-deterministic thing into a controllable deterministic thing, in which case you're just going to be disappointed because all the LLMs are going to behave randomly sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. That's another feeling I think we have as parents and grandparents, is that, like, the joy in actually being surprised.
And it's part of the human experience to be able to experience the full range of human emotions.
Yeah, speaking of exploring the full range, what's next for this experiment? What are you looking forward to teaching your twin? What new capabilities are you looking forward to it showing off?
Well, for me, one of the things that's been the most rewarding is to essentially focus on what are the activities that are of my highest and best use. HBU is a term from the real estate industry. How do you want to tackle a plot of land? Is this best used as a productive farm lot? Is it a parking lot? Is it best used to build a 20-story commercial type of a building? I think that humans are very similar in that we all have the activities that are of our highest and best use and activities that we should not do. And so, as I think objectively about my calendar, and where I spend time over the course of the week, having Laila essentially gives me permission to ask, should I have attended that meeting? Or is that the sort of a meeting where in the future I need to make sure that Laila is attending? So, for instance, at least 3 times a week, somebody calls me to say, Iliana, we're doing work with an organization in the insurance space. They're experiencing problem ABC. Have you done anything along these lines? And I sit there and go through my Rolodex of all the projects that I've been involved with over the years to say, there's a project in healthcare, different industry, but there are some parallels, and you should read this document and go talk to so and so and talk to so and so and read this case study. And then you repeat that same conversation, but you just swap out the industry and the problem domain. After a while, there's a pattern to my logic making and sense making. And I don't necessarily want to participate in the fifth one of these conversations in a week. Those are the sorts of things I'd rather offload to the AI so that what I can do is take one of my team members out for a coaching lunch or a coffee and actually have a conversation about their goals, their aspirations, their career, their trajectory, their dreams, and help coach them, which I love doing. Arguably, they benefit from. And it's a far better use of my time than mechanically ish regurgitating things that we've done in the past.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. The so there's yeah there I think there's some easy wins in that kind of really semantic retrieval, right? If you think about it, the phone conversation is essentially a database lookup, right? So it's a database lookup happening in the least efficient way possible
Yes, in
via,
my
via
brain.
two humans in real time via voice.
Yes, exactly. And then what if I'm on vacation that day?
Right,
What if I was over caffeinated that day?
right,
What if my
right,
brain was just foggy?
right. I wonder if I think we need some sort of metric of fidelity, but like if I knew that your um if I knew that your twin had a certain high level of fidelity with you, and you knew that my twin had a high fidelity of high fidelity representation of me, then we could also just have the twins have the coaching call and see if it's successful before committing to doing the real one.
I wouldn't take it that far. I believe that coaching is a fundamentally very human thing, and I do not fall in the camp of the technologists that want to build tech for the sake of building tech and automating things for the sake of automating things. However, in this example of Laila helping someone find case studies and examples to look at, I call that the first conversation. I don't need to be part of the first conversation. But after the person on the other end has read the materials that they've been pointed to, had a couple of other conversations, then I'd be delighted to speak with them for meeting number two. Because in meeting number two, we both enter it with a similar knowledge of information so that then now we can have a really productive conversation that actually uses both of our sets of brains. It's almost like showing up to a meeting with an executive where you've had to send a pre-read document and there are some briefing materials that you've had to read in advance so that it's a productive discussion. That's really where I want to position Laila, not as a replacement of key functionality, but augmentation and allowing me to focus where I should be focused.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. I I think that there's quite a bit of leverage possible in that almost like pre-orientation. Ooh, yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, I like that. Um, what else in terms of upgrades? Anything?
It's less about upgrades to Lila specifically, but I'm really excited to see how the use of digital humans in various organizations is going to take off. So I'm in discussions with all sorts of organizations who are looking at digital humans as a way to augment their customer support function, for instance, or in healthcare to support the provisioning of healthcare, especially in remote regions where patients don't have infinite number of doctors to walk into. I'm primarily based out of Canada, and we are experiencing a severe shortage of doctors and nurses. So you couple that with the fact that when you interact with a digital human, the digital human doesn't judge you. And that was an interesting aha moment that I've had from watching other people interacting with Laila, sometimes they'll share things that are much more vulnerable with her than they would necessarily with a human, because they know that the digital human isn't judging. And so for me, I'm really interested to see how will organizations embrace the addition of digital humans within their workplaces, and how will they equip their human workforce to interact and to learn from these non-human entities, and the creation of what our Accenture Tech Vision report calls the virtuous learning loop between the human, the AI, the technology, and how we all are learning right way and left way.
Yeah, nice. I've seen a similar phenomenon play out in AI therapy where people will let their guard down and open up more. And I think there's another element. It's not just about the non-judgmentality, it's also the knowledge that you can delete the conversation.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Which I think is really important. And I have to note that there's a theme across all of these use cases, which is actually enhancement, not cost reduction.
Correct. You don't cut your way to innovation. And now, with all of these advances in AI, with all of the advances in robotics, and that's another big trend that the Accenture Tech Trends is looking at, embodied AI, there is an opportunity for organizations to fundamentally reimagine their business from the ground up and all of the interaction points. And that's what's exciting. It's not about the race to the bottom of a cost cutting exercise. We in 2025 are at such an interesting inflection point from a technology standpoint, societal standpoint, and the rest of it, to really be building a future world that we're excited about. And that's what I want organizations to be embracing.
I feel the same. That the extraordinary acceleration that we're seeing means that 10x improvements, 100x improvements, 1000x improvements are possible, and that's obviously a bigger lever than cost cutting, which can only go down by 100%, right? Like you can't cut costs 1000x, but you can literally provide 1000x more availability, 1000x better effectiveness.
And there's a lot of room for growth. When you look at our Accenture Life Trends report, one of the trends we call out is the dignity of work, where out of the thousands of people surveyed, many express that they're feeling more like cogs in a machine than they are feeling like valued contributors and valued resources. Employee engagement scores at an all-time low across sectors. The Edelman Trust report that just came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago similarly showed declines in trust on so many different dimensions, which means that there's a tremendous opportunity to use technology to make our workforces feel more engaged, connected, valuable, and in turn, those are the workforce that are providing services to your end customers. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to improve the customer experience and the personalization and meeting that customer with where they're at in that point of their journey and supporting them throughout using this technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Right. That and that's the form of delegation that we should be leaning into in the future, so that our work as humans feels like meaningfully helping other human beings, which is not just high leverage, profitable work, but also makes you feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of feeling good, this conversation was full of hope and optimism. Uh, for people listening who want to learn more about Laila and about you, where should they go?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active posting there, and my Substack, where I'm sharing a lot more of my unedited thoughts and work in progress and just perspectives across all the different fields that I spend time floating between.
Fantastic. All right, we'll add both of those URLs to the show notes.
Okay, great.